Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting over episode 18 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. If you'd like to watch along, start watching now. So the first thing we see here is Evangelion Unit 3 being transported via airplane. Now, interestingly enough, the way the EVA is suspended, it's sort of like restrained on a cross and suspended underneath the plane. And in my mind, that seems like a very poor way of transporting it, but I guess in Evangelion, symbolism is better than, I guess, the practicality of it. So Shinji and Misato are having a brief conversation, and Misato's, I guess, struggling to sort of tell him about Toji. She's sort of dancing around the issue and taking the opportunity to answer Shinji's question about something else. So notably, Misato is heading to the secondary nerve facility to watch the test of Unit 3. Ultimately, Misato doesn't get a chance to tell Shinji who the pilot is, because Kensuke interrupts. So while at first it seemed like something serious, Kensuke came to request that he be the pilot for Unit 3. As Misato's setting out on the road, she's talking to Ritsuko, and they're sort of talking about how Shinji still doesn't know, there wasn't really a good time and all that. Ritsuko's not very sympathetic. So Ritsuko lets slip that Toji's not too enthusiastic about being a pilot either, and that he only decided to become a pilot under the condition that his sister be transferred to Nerve's private hospital for better health care. So everybody seems to be in a rather poor mood. Toji's sort of picking at Asuka, Asuka's snapping at everyone. Notably, Toji also leaves during lunch, which Kensuke indicates is wildly out of character. So he's just sort of brooding instead. Notably, Rei seeks him out. So Toji and Rei are sort of talking about how essentially everybody knows but Shinji about his status as a pilot. So the class rep, it seems, is somewhat disappointed that Toji isn't eating lunch, especially because I guess she went out of her way to make one for him. So notably, Toji doesn't return to class. Instead, he's just sort of being delinquent and staring at the sky. He's reflecting about how he had beat up Shinji. And I guess it's safe to say if he regretted it before, he thoroughly regrets it now. So notably, Asuka and the class rep are talking, and their topic of conversation is Toji. Well, Toji and Shinji. So the class rep seems convinced that Toji is interested in Rei. Asuka is fairly confident that this is not the case, and of course, it's pretty clear to us that that's not the case. So Asuka and Shinji are alone in the apartment. Shinji expresses some, curiosity about the new pilot. Asuka, sort of expresses disbelief and then changes the subject. So Kaji's sort of been drafted into being their babysitter. And I guess he notices the tension between Shinji and Asuka that's going on, and he disapproves. So Shinji's asking Kaji about his father, interestingly enough, as though Kaji were an authority on him. So Kaji drops a little wisdom here about how hard it is for people to understand themselves, much less other people. So Keiji gets a little metaphorical there, and Shinji, per usual, doesn't really follow. So now at the test site, it looks like they're preparing to get Unit 3 online for the first time. Everything seems to be going well so far. So once again, the topic of telling Shinji comes up, and Misato sort of defers it till after the test. Notably, back at class, Toji's not there, much to the disappointment of the class rep. Similarly, Kensuke is distraught by not having been chosen as the pilot. So, jokingly, Kensuke says, ooh, maybe Toji's the pilot, and Shinji expresses, I guess, good-natured disbelief. So now the test is beginning. The entry plug has been inserted, and things are going pretty well so far. So it passed through the borderline, seemingly without issue, but now things are going wrong. It seems like the pilot is desynchronizing from the Evangelion. But it's also become clear that something else is wrong here, and it might be the work of an angel. So this is a big problem here. So NERV knows that it's the other site, and they also know that if they don't get this wrapped up quickly, the Japanese Self-Defense Force will get involved, and they really don't want that. So they're going to dispatch their own EVAs to handle whatever's going on. It's also not clear to NERV whether or not it is in fact an angel. So we've got a bit of a bad sign here in that Misato is not commanding the operation, but rather Gendo is. So perhaps understandably, Shinji is concerned. So it becomes clear that Unit 3 is unwell. They're trying to eject the entry plug, but that's not working. Gendo is very quick to say, let's cut our losses, declare Unit 3 the 13th Angel, it has to be destroyed. That's an approach I really disagree with. It's that sort of utilitarian mindset that the ends justify the means. Shinji is notably ambivalent about this whole thing because, yeah, it might be an angel, but it's also an Evangelion, and it's got a pilot, so destroying it is right out in Shinji's mind, because that would be tantamount to murder. So things start going wrong as Asuka gets knocked out fairly quickly by Unit 3. It's not exactly clear what happened, but one way or another, Asuka's out of commission. So Gendo sends Rei in Unit 0 as the lead, with Shinji in Unit 1 as the backup. seems to me that he's sort of favoring Rei here when all past evidence has indicated that Unit 1 is better overall. Notably here, Rei is hesitating, in all probability because she knows it's Toji in there. So that hesitation's really cost her. Unit 3's pinned down Unit 0, and it seems to be leaking a fluid onto Unit 0, infecting it. Notably, Gendo is being particularly ruthless here. They've rather viciously excised Unit 0's left arm to prevent infection, regardless of how much pain it causes Rei, considering how well synchronized she is. I mean, it makes sense to do, I guess, but at the same time, it really doesn't take into account the well-being of the pilot, which you would think, given how scarce the appropriate resources are for NERV, that they would be top priority. So at this stage in the game, only Unit 1 is left. And Shinji's already psyching himself out by thinking about how there's a pilot in there just like him, and he's unwilling to kill. So Unit 3 strikes, and it strikes pretty hard and fast. Unfortunately, Shinji gets confirmation that Unit 3 still has its entry plug in. So Shinji's necessarily fighting at a disadvantage, whereas the 13th Angel in Unit 3 has no such reservation. It's immediately strangling Unit 1. And notably, given the sync ratio, we can see like the indentations of fingers and hands on Shinji's neck. So it's almost as though he's actually being strangled himself. So things really hit the fan here. Shinji declares that he'd rather die than kill, and Gendo says, you know what, that's it. Cut Shinji off and enable the dummy plug. So Shinji is saved from death, at least in the short term, but there might be a worse fate in store for him. So despite being untested, the dummy plug is working out so far, which I guess is a pretty good outcome considering most other tests have ended in some sort of catastrophic failure. So with the dummy plug going, Unit 1 immediately starts fighting back, choking out Unit 3. And it seems like it's very quickly gaining the upper hand. That's considerable because Unit 1 was sort of like, I guess, like a beta test model, whereas Unit 3 is like an actual production model like Unit 2. So Unit 1 really pulls no punches. Like, it just snaps Unit 3's neck with its bare hands. Not only that, it hoists it off the ground by its neck and starts slamming it into the ground and just utterly pummeling it. Now this scene is one of the most unsettling. It absolutely pulverizes Unit 3's skull, and then it just starts tearing chunks out of its armor and presumably its body. I think it just tore an arm off there. Like, the command staff is watching in horror as the buildings and the streets are being coated in blood and viscera. So the worst part of all this is that Shinji is screaming for it to stop. So Unit 1 ultimately picks up the entry plug from the eviscerated Eva and crushes it in its hand, sort of snapping it, bending it, deforming it. You know, the dummy plug might have been effective, but the last bit of destroying the entry plug was just plain overkill. There's no excuse for that. So we get a little bit of dramatic irony with the class rep saying, "Man, I think I'll cook all this stuff. I hope Toji's gonna be hungry tomorrow." It's a very cruel irony. So, fortunately, Misato has survived the incident, albeit with injuries. But she doesn't know anything about Unit 3 and what happened to it. Kaji sort of gives him the rundown about how there's an angel and how it was destroyed, but she doesn't know about the brutal method by which it was destroyed. So back to Shinji in Unit 1. He's still holed up in there. So Misato starts speaking to him, and she's extremely apologetic. So, somewhat fortunately for Shinji, he didn't end up killing the pilot. Unfortunately, he learns of the identity of the pilot and what it means that he did. Understandably, he doesn't take this very well. Alright, that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one.